Okay, welcome to another video. This time around it is a review, and to be perfectly honest, a total rant on the absolutely wretched sequel that is RoboCop 3. Back online, back on duty, more like back on life support and back on diaper duty, because this movie is full of shit. Oh, here's another one. He's back to lay down the law. No, he's back to lay down like a dog. RoboCop 3 is one of the most atrocious, weak, limp-dicked sequels out there. Like, this is one of those sequels that ranks right up there with the sequels that absolutely reek in terms of quality and have wreaked so much havoc to their respective franchises. It's right up there with films like Alien 3, Halloween 5. The list goes on and on. This is one of those sequels that is so shitty, so awful, that the franchise has never recovered from the damage that it has done. This film single-handedly neutered the character of RoboCop and the entire franchise in one fellow swoop. So, despite my feelings towards this film now, I will admit this. I do have a small speck of respect and appreciation for this film, because if it wasn't for RoboCop 3, if it wasn't for me watching this film on VHS when I was a kid, I would have never been introduced to the character of RoboCop, and I would have never fell in love with the character as much as I do. So despite my rage, despite my ire toward this movie, it will always have that. And I've got to be honest, I like the jetpack scene. I think the accessories that he has, like the gun arm, are pretty cool. Some of the supporting cast delivers some decent performances. And to be honest, the overall script and the story has a lot of interesting concepts and has potential. It's completely wasted, but it still isn't completely hopeless when it comes to its overall story. And Basil Polidoris' score is fantastic. And I have to admit also that Fred Dekker's direction isn't really that bad. It's dynamic enough, and it's far from this film's biggest problem or one of its biggest flaws. Although I have to say it doesn't have the same dynamic energy as his direction in films like The Monster Squad or Night of the Creeps. It doesn't have the same style either, or the same flair, but it's not particularly awful. So this film was rushed into production pretty soon after RoboCop 2 finished shooting, because the initial plan right from the get-go was to shoot RoboCop 2 and 3 back to back, because apparently Orion got wind of what Robert Zemeckis and company were doing for Back to the Future 2 and 3, and they thought, that's a novel idea, and we're going to do that too, and we're going to rake in the cash. And that's not what happened at all. RoboCop 2 underperformed in the box office. Orion went under in 1991, or had to file for bankruptcy, and were in serious trouble. And this film was actually finished in 1991, but didn't get a theatrical release until 2 years later in 1993. By that point, RoboCop was almost a dead franchise because nobody really cared about the character as much. And the intended audience that Orion was trying to pull in of teenagers and kids, well, that didn't work either. Because if you're trying to pull in teenagers or kids, you know why teenagers and kids liked the first two films? Is because they were cool. Is because they were rated R. Is because they were violent. Because they had balls. You know why kids and teenagers didn't really like RoboCop 3 or didn't really come to go see it? It's because it didn't have any of those things. It didn't have action. It didn't have balls. And it wasn't rated R. Because kids back then, they legitimately like to see mature films. This is a proven thing. There were a lot of kids back in the 80s and 90s that would have their parents take them to go see R-rated action movies like Predator and RoboCop or Terminator 2, and that's why they were big hits. Not because they were PG-13. None of those movies were PG-13. Those films also weren't specifically catering towards kids either. So that's another reason why those films were successful. That's why a lot of those kids and teenagers thought those movies were badass. Because they were badass. Because they were badass for kids and adults. This movie is lame. This is a lame-ass movie for kids and adults. It was such a lame-ass approach by Orion. You're already in trouble financially. Why do you think that you're going to make more money with a crippled, handicapped, crappy RoboCop sequel that doesn't even have the ultra-violence that drew a lot of audiences in for the first two films? I mean, it doesn't take a fucking rocket scientist to see how dumb of an idea it was to cut the franchise's nuts off and make it PG-13. And also throw in a cliched kid who's super smart and can hack into anything and try to, I guess, make a giant toy commercial for toys that didn't really sell much. Although, to be honest, I still have my RoboCop 3 tie-in action figure that my dad got for me from KB Toys, and that's one of the best things that I can think of when it comes to this movie, is that toy. That still means a lot to me. It's still in good shape. I still proudly display it, and that for some reason though, the toy has like the blue tint paint job that was in RoboCop 2. So why the hell is it? It doesn't look anything like RoboCop does in the movie. And anyway, enough ranting on the production history of RoboCop 3. Let's actually talk about the movie. So it's directed by Fred Dekker, and I like Fred Dekker. I've met him personally. I've shook his hand. He gave me props for my OCP hat that I had before when I wore it to a screening of the Monster Squad. I have his autograph. He's a really nice guy, and I have a lot of appreciation for a good amount of his work. I love Night of the Creeps. The Monster Squad is one of my favorite films, and he's directed some of my all-time favorite episodes of Tales from the Crypt. I've spoke to him through Facebook as well. I've talked to him about Tales from the Crypt, and he's been really appreciative of the fact that I actually acknowledge his work on episodes like Thing from the Grave and so on and so forth. And I was one of the few people that was actually rooting for him to make a legitimate comeback with The Predator. And that's why that film was so disappointing too, is because I was in Fred Dekker's corner and he didn't really pay any of it off. He didn't pay any of my faith off in him. And then with this movie, I mean, this film has a really god-awful story and screenplay, although there are some interesting concepts. I don't mind the idea of the rehabs. I don't mind stuff like the cops quitting and then helping the freedom fighters fight mercenaries and the rehabs near the end of the movie. I like the jetpack. I like the accessories that RoboCop has, even though it's essentially just an excuse to sell toys. But I still admit I do like it, and they're well designed. I think there are some genuinely funny bits, like the media break reporter giving up in the middle of a presentation about how RoboCop has gone rogue and has killed a bunch of nuns, and she's just like, "Can you believe this bullshit? No." It's like, "I'm not going to say this anymore. I can't do it. Can you believe this bullshit?" Um, I like that. I think the Delta City advertisement in the beginning was fun. The Johnny Rehab animated segment was entertaining. And there are other parts of this movie that I don't mind. I mean, even let's go back to other elements of the script, which Fred Dekker uh, contributed, along with Frank Miller, who, to be honest, Frank Miller's contributions to the script that ultimately was shot are very, very little. For the most part, it's Fred Dekker's screenplay. The suicide bit, the suicide gag that is used by a lot of people with GIFs and is, in a lot of ways, more memorable and something that is a part of pop culture more than the movie itself. I mean, that it's a nice bit of dark humor, and it fits right in line with the overall tone of the franchise. Even the idea of robot ninjas isn't a bad idea. They managed to fuck it up, but it's still not a bad idea. So yeah, there are moments in this script that shine, but they're very few and far between. For the most part, it's a rusty, old pile of steel that'll give you tetanus. Fred Dekker himself has even said that he wishes that he hired somebody else to work on the script. He wishes that there was more things that were done with it. He wishes that it was rated R, and I agree with him wholeheartedly on that. And there's another reason why there should have been more people to write the script, because for the most part, the one-liners RoboCop has to say are cringe-inducing and beyond laughable. I mean, "You better call the fire department." "She said no. What are you, hard of hearing?" And my personal favorite, "Don't." It's a one-liner. That's a one-liner in this movie. "Don't." Yeah, don't watch this fucking movie. That's that that's 100% accurate. Or another one. "Don't count on it, chum." Eat your fucking heart out, Adam West, because RoboCop is to the rescue. Like, Jesus fucking Christ. Don't count on it, chum. What is this, the 60s Batman TV show? So yeah, the script really did suck in that department. I mean, what did he say that was badass? That was the equivalent of "your move, creep." They have him try to say the same thing here, and it doesn't work. Or "Dead or Alive, You're Coming With Me" says the same thing here too, and it doesn't have the same impact or resonance as it did in the first movie, or even the second film. Also, this script is a huge reason why this film is so miserably and poorly paced. 15 minutes of this movie go by, and the first and only shot of RoboCop you have in that time frame is of his visor in a rear view mirror. Rear view mirror. Sorry, for some reason, just talking about this movie causes my brain to get all discombobulated, and I can't say certain words. But yeah, you just see a shot of his visor in a car mirror. And before that, you just saw a shot of a RoboCop toy that our cute cliche happened to have in her bedroom. So yeah, that's what you get. 15 minutes. into your RoboCop movie. It's only like an hour and 40 something minutes without the end credits. For some reason, during the first 15 minutes of the movie, where there isn't a whole lot of RoboCop in the RoboCop film, they decided to introduce the Freedom Fighters, this group of individuals who are trying to save their homes from OCP and the rehabs, because OCP and the rehabs are a bunch of corrupt corporate jerk-offs who just want to kick them out of their homes and bulldoze the area so they can build Delta City. And this is a concept and a element of the story where you would think that it would be easy to get the audience on their side. But Dekker's script just fails miserably at this. It portrays the freedom fighters at the start as rather unlikable characters. In fact, they come across as criminals. They are being chased by the cops in the first 15 minutes of the movie. They break into a police armory. There's a scene where you have one of the freedom fighters who becomes one of the main heroic characters by the end of the movie. And he's painted in a pretty negative light. They're trying to find a way to get into the armory, and he grabs a key card, and he's all like, "I got this off a dead cop." And you're like, really? So, and he says it in a way that's just so nonchalant and matter of fact. Like, "I got it off a dead cop." You're like, so either you don't give a shit about cops, or you're the one that killed the cop and stole the key card. Like, I get you're trying to have characters have a little bit of grit, but I personally, when I saw that scene and saw that particular line delivery, it turned me off on that character from the start. And the film didn't really do that much to make me like the character later on. It tried, but it didn't really work. It came across as fake to me because it never really addressed this aspect of this character. It doesn't help either that a lot of these characters, these homeless individuals, these freedom fighters, they look like the same kind of henchmen that would be right at home in Kane's hideout or Bodeker's hideout or any drug dealer's hideout. I mean, there's even a scene in the film where there's a guy with a beard, a scraggly beard, and a bandana holding a gun in front of a shady looking warehouse. I mean, it looks like a sequence that you would see in a RoboCop movie where RoboCop would show up, lay down the law, and that guy would get shot in the chest. Like, maybe they're trying to play with conventions or something, but it just doesn't work. And the film just does a really bad job. The screenplay does a really piss poor job in making you sympathize with, let alone learn to like, these characters, these freedom fighters who were so crucial to this plot. So it's another aspect of this movie that is a total flop. And when he does show up, it's all kinds of fucking lame. Robert John Burke doesn't portray RoboCop in this movie. He portrays RoboFlop because he flops on his shiny metal ass for the majority of the movie. I mean, and there's also so many attempts to try to make him cool that also flop badly. Like the whole entrance, the grand entrance for RoboCop, where he goes out of his way to drive up multiple floors of a parking structure so he could drive off the top of it and land on the ground in front of these splatterpunks, shoot the roof off, pop out like a jack-in-the-box, and then say, "You called for backup?" I mean... And then he shoots his gun arm attachment, which looks cool, but he doesn't hit anybody with it because it's PG-13 and we gotta think of the children. I mean, you have essentially a minigun on his arm, and there is not a single fucking sequence in this movie that really makes that minigun badass. It's like if you had Jesse Ventura and Predator with Old Painless, and it's PG-13, and instead of shooting the Predator or shooting anything with it, he just shoots the minigun, and like bullets just kind of fall in front of the mercenary's feet and don't cause any damage. You just be like, well, that's fucking lame. That's exactly what happens here. That's sort of that's the best reaction to RoboCop 3. Well, that's fucking lame. Like, that really is. Like, you'll be saying that multiple times while you're watching this film. But seriously, unless you're a masochist or you feel like you need to watch everything RoboCop related, to quote the film itself, don't. It's really not worth it. It isn't. So, 15 minutes of the movie, RoboCop doesn't show up. When he does show up, it's lame. And then he gets lit on fire, which is what I want to do to this fucking movie. And that's pretty much what this film did to the franchise. It blew it up. So, he gets lit on fire. And then you have some stuff involving Lewis, and he blows up a OCP truck because he can't shoot anybody because of a directive. And then he gets his ass handed to him throughout the majority of the movie. He gets one grenade shot to the chest and is out like a fucking light. There's even a scene in the film where he's walking in a sewer. He's stumbling around. He says, "I'm fine." And then he falls face first into what might as well be toilet water. I mean, that is just the perfect image to describe this movie and what this franchise has become. RoboCop, "I'm fine," and then falls face first into shitty water. Face first into a pile of shit. Diarrhea. Just face, diarrhea, RoboCop 3. Like, fuck, man. It's so upsetting to me. Because you go from RoboCop shooting guys in the balls, shooting motherfuckers in the eye, to not hitting anybody, to just shooting around people. And if he does shoot anybody, it has no weight to it. And then falling face first into diarrhea. And then even you would think, okay, all right, that's the low point. It doesn't get any better. He gets repaired and then still sucks all kinds of ass and flops on his ass some more. He fights the robot ninja Tomo and moves like a fucking tortoise and gets his ass handed to him, which is a theme throughout this entire movie. He gets his fingers cut off, gets his arm cut off. Should have just cut off all his fingers and left the middle finger there, because that's honestly how I feel about this movie. Just chop, chop, chop. Fuck. Fuck you. Yeah, he gets his arm cut off, gets his butt handed to him. Even in the climax, he's facing off against two ninjas. He needs Nico, the cute cliche, to save his ass because he sucks so much ass. So, other than the jetpack sequence, where he's fighting the rehabs and helping the cops and the freedom fighters, and he shoots some people, that's really the only thing that he does in this movie that is remotely badass. Because even the fucking sequence when he goes to the rehab facility in the police station with a flamethrower isn't really that cool. He ruins it with his whole, "you better call the fire department," and then, just burns some shit. But it's not shot in a way that's cool. He's not lighting anybody on fire. It has all the gravitas and impact of a episode of the 1988 Marvel cartoon. That's not even getting to the scene where he drives around in a pink fucking Cadillac that he stole from a pimp. That's so funny. RoboCop's driving around in a pink Cadillac. Goes from riding around on a Harley fucking Davidson to driving around in a pink Cadillac complete with fuzzy fucking dice. So yeah, Robert John Burke is a robo-flop in this. His performance is awful too. It's absolutely atrocious. He looks the part physically, and there are some sequences where he kind of half-asses it in a way that it's mediocre, but they don't really save the performance. And most of them happen when he doesn't have his helmet on. For some reason, Fred Dekker or whoever was involved with this choice, which is a stupid choice, by the way, they decided that RoboCop, when he has his helmet on, should sound different than when he has his helmet off. So when he has his helmet off, it's just Robert John Burke with his normal voice, and there's no voice modulator, and RoboCop doesn't sound like he got kicked in the head 10 times and is slow. Because when he has his visor on, it sounds terrible. It's overmodulated. Robert John Burke is like really slow. And it sounds like what happens if you have an electronic toy that talks and the battery dies out. That's what it sounds like. It's the same sort of sound. Where it's like, you called for backup. You know, there's this really weird modulated, over-modulated voice. You're making a mistake. Yeah. The mistake was this fucking movie. The mistake was making a PG-13 RoboCop sequel. The mistake was doing a RoboCop film without Peter Weller. The mistake was just making this film, period. Why don't you just wait and do the TV series? Because the TV series has a legitimate reason why RoboCop wouldn't be shooting people in the dick or shooting them in the eye, or it wouldn't have the ultraviolence. Because it's a TV show for syndication. They can't have that. Plus, Richard Eaton did a damn good job as Murphy and as RoboCop. And might have helped this film just a little bit just being in this movie. Now, apparently, speaking of Peter Weller, Peter actually did meet with Fred Dekker, and he expressed some genuine interest in doing the movie. But since Orion was in such a crunch financially, they didn't want to wait, and Peter was like, well, I'm going to be doing Naked Lunch because I really want to work with David Cronenberg, and that's what happened. But Peter Weller apparently did meet with Fred Dekker. And I'm not saying the film would be any better with Peter Weller, because it would still have the same flaws and the same problems. I mean, if Peter Weller says the line, don't, or don't count on it, chum, like, it's not going to be any better. It's still going to suck. But it still would have been nice to have seen Peter Weller play the role again. It's kind of like Superman 4: The Quest for Peace. You know, that film could have been even worse if Christopher Reeve didn't play Superman, because he's one of the few bright spots in that movie. So the rest of the cast are, honestly, for the most part, except for a couple exceptions, are straight up ass. So you have Remy Ryan as Nico, who's the cute cliche kid who can hack into anything and everything and make the Ed 209 loyal as a puppy, because it wasn't enough for this movie to emasculate and completely just cut off all of the balls from RoboCop. It also had to do it to the Ed 209, which had already been comical at times anyway. But this just took it to a whole other level of garbage by hacking into it and having it say, I am loyal as a puppy, and Eat lead, suckers. So she hacks into everything and everything because she's a genius, because the script is lazy. Performance is lazy too. For a kid actress, she's really not very good. And the character is not likable. They do nothing to make this character likable. They just try to say, it's a kid, it's a little girl. You can't hate a little girl, right? Wrong. Wrong. Dead wrong. Hobb was more likable. And he was a drug dealer. Then you have Bruce Locke, who plays Atomo, who apparently only got this role because one of the producers saw him leave a gym and was like, hey, he looks like he could play a robot ninja. And Bruce Locke's not really the problem, but he's got nothing to do. And he does nothing cool. He does nothing badass. He does nothing memorable. His idea of intimidating a guy at a truck stop is just cutting his sign down. Not fucking him up. Not cutting a limb off. None of that shit. Just cuts his sign down. What a badass. And then he gets hit in the face with the pipe. Looks like a fucking goober with a fucking fake look on his face. Gets his head blown off by RoboCop, who's moving as slow as fucking molasses. And then he gets hacked into by Mako in the climax and cuts his own head off because there's two of him. Fred Dekker said that he would have liked to have had Japanese or Hong Kong stuntmen do the stunts for the robots. He's right. That would have helped a little bit. Like, have some actual stunts. I mean, and Bruce Locke can do some stuff like that, but have actual stunt choreography. Actually have fight choreography. Should have gotten Steve Wang involved or something. The guy who did Guyver 2 Dark Hero. I mean, look at those fight scenes, and they're all in suits and everything. So you could have done that with the Robot Ninja and maybe RoboCop. I don't know. But at least do something more than this lame-ass bullshit. And then you have Nancy Allen, who returns as Anne Lewis, but apparently, depending on what source you hear, there's one source that says she only did this because the character was going to be killed off. There's another source that says she didn't know anything about that until she had lunch with the director and looked over the script and was not happy about it. I don't know which one is true, but either way, it was a dumb idea. And Nancy Allen, I like her and I appreciate her, and I think she's actually a pretty solid actress. This is not one of her finest hours. She sleptwalked through the role, she half-assed a lot of the lines, and her death scene was pathetic. Get them for me. Get them for me, Murphy. Get them. And it seemed like this movie had a bunch of actors and actresses that just want to compete with one another as to who would perform the worst possible death scene. Because if you think Nancy Allen's scene, her death scene was bad enough, then you got CCH Pounder with her go. And I'm like, go fuck yourself, movie. CCH Pounder should go pound the pavement because her performance in this sequence was awful. It was atrocious. It was just straight up ass. And I know she's done a lot better stuff later in her career, but this was not a good performance by her, by any means. And then you got like Rip Torn, who's just ripping up and chewing every piece of the scenery he possibly can with his giant gaping teeth. Gaping teeth probably isn't the right word to use. His giant gaping maw is just chewing everything up. What have you got, Warwacky? Do you need to go back to acting school, Rip? May you rest in peace, but man, this performance stunk like a really bad ripped fart. It's not one of his best roles, that's for sure, and a huge step down from O'Hara Lee and anyone else, really. Why didn't Felton Perry have the lead as the new chairman of OCP? Why do we have Rip Torn hamming it up so much he should be cut up and served at your local deli? Like, I don't get it. There's so many decisions in this where I'm like, I don't get it. You got a weird scene in this movie where Robert DoQui, who was honestly really good. I will give Robert DoQui a lot of props for his performance as Reed. Like, he had a lot to do in this, and I thought he was great. But he has nothing to work with in the scene where he's at the police station and there's this guy arguing with him, and then there's this what looks like fucking Shaquille O'Neal or Magic Johnson in drag holding a giant fucking lollipop and going, yeah, yeah, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? But every once in a blue moon there'll be a scene that's absurd that kind of works, like the donut shop scene where Lee Ehrenberg, Marty Slash himself from the Tales from the Crypt episode for Crying Out Loud with Sam Kinison, he shows up as the donut jerk, and he's trying to hold up a donut shop, and there's all the cops are there. I mean, it's kind of a out there thing, but it made me chuckle. Plus, in that scene, you also see Jeff Garlin, who you might recognize from Comedy Central and other stuff, as the guy who runs the register at the donut shop. Doesn't save the movie. The fun cameos. I mean, you even got James Lorenz, who was in Frankenhooker. Street Trash. He has a little cameo in this. As well as Shane Black. Because, you know, Shane Black is buddies with Fred Dekker. In fact, Fred Dekker wanted Shane Black to work on the script, but things just didn't work out. I don't know if they would have been better or not, but it probably would have helped a little bit. You got Mako in this, who plays Kanemitsu, who's the guy who is the main CEO of this corporation, this Japanese corporation that took over OCP, but he's got nothing to do. He doesn't even say any lines of dialogue other than the ones that are dubbed over by a text-to-speech program in one scene. So it's honestly a nothing role for him. Bradley Whitford as Fleck. Honestly, wish he had more screen time because he played a really good douchebag that got on your nerves. Like, he's the type of character that you kind of love to hate because he really dug his heels in and really relished the opportunity to play such a risible, just unlikable character. But he's not in the film that much and ultimately gets fired, and then we're stuck with Rip Torn. He should have taken over OCP and then been even more of a megalomaniac. Hell, I would have taken him over the main villain, over Father of the Bride, Savage Steve Martin, John Castle, who apparently was competing with Tom fucking Atkins for the role, and Tom Thrill Me Atkins lost to Evil Steve Martin. How the fuck did Tom Atkins lose the lead villain role to Evil Steve Martin? It's one of life's mysteries. 'Cause I have no fucking clue. Apparently Fred Dekker and other producers said, oh yeah, we did the screen testing, and Tom and John were in the running, and John won the role. How? Was it the way that he said, "You stupid slag"? Is it the way that he said that? Is it the way that he screamed like a bitch when he got his feet lit on fire in the end of the movie? Is that how? Did he go to a screen test and go, ah? And then he got the role? Like, I mean, how the hell did he win that job over Tom Atkins? Now, Tom Atkins would still probably have sucked as the villain because the villain is lame, but he would have added something to it that John Castle isn't capable of. And this character of Mcdaggett sucked. Hobb. I'm going back to Hobb here because it bears repeating. Hobb was a more intimidating villain than your lead villain in this movie. And he's a fucking kid. Mcnugget needed to dip himself in barbecue sauce and eat a dick. Because he sucks dick. This is so bad. Such a awful fucking character. He's a pussy. He hides from RoboCop in a hotel. He has two robot ninjas do his dirty work. He doesn't even get in any kind of conflict or confrontation with RoboCop. Boddicker was just flesh and blood, but he's stabbing him with metal. Sayonara, RoboCop. Mcnugget over here is just using dirty tricks like throwing money to roller hockey kids so he can escape from RoboCop, or just shooting his car what feels like 50 times with a grenade launcher. I guess the most memorable thing he did in this movie was scream like a bitch before he died, and then he killed Ann Lewis. But yeah, I mean, and the character, I will say this, it's not a likable character, but it's not a memorable character. And it's not the type of villain that you love to hate. You just hate him when he's on screen because you want him to leave. Because he's a bitch. I did like Jill Hennessy. Jill Hennessy as Marie Lazarus. You could see why this is an actress that would go on to have a much bigger career after this and have more roles. She legitimately gave a shit about her performance, gave a shit about the character, and as a result was one of the few shining stars in this cast. But there aren't that many shining stars in this cast. You've got Jill Hennessy, you've got Felton Perry in the little bit that he had, you got Robert DoQui and Bradley Whitford, and that's it. Because no one else really shone. They didn't really shine. They stunk. The film features a score by Basil Poledouris because Fred Dekker really wanted Basil to be a part of the film. He felt that was sorely missing from RoboCop 2, and he was right. And that's the one thing about this movie, other than the jetpack scene and the accessories and some of the visual effects, that is legitimately great for what it is. This is a great score. I especially like the souped up rendition of the RoboCop main theme that he uses in the climax and a few other sequences in the movie. And there were scenes where the score is trying so hard to make it work, and it almost does. But it's just a tall order, and even Basil can't save the film, despite all of his hard work with this score. This score deserved to be in a much better film. It's a damn shame that it wasn't. The cinematography by Barry B. Kibb, I don't think I'm gonna blame him for it, but it looked very TV movie-esque to me. It wasn't really that particularly impressive. Apparently he's worked with John Carpenter before, but it just really wasn't that impressive cinematography. I mean, compared to the cinematography in RoboCop 2 or the first film, it just didn't really have any of that just impressive look to it. It just didn't. It just looked rather just dingy and cheap. The editing by Burt Lovett, I guess it's okay. There's nothing spectacular about it. 104 minutes that are way too long because RoboCop spends most of the movie flopping on his shiny metal ass. And the action sequences flop. The PG-13 rating cripples the film. It completely handicaps it because any of the action sequences are just completely 100% hampered as a result because they can't go all out. And in certain action sequences where the R rating would help a lot. Like just some blood squibs, some arms getting blown off, somebody getting shot in the face. These are things that would make some of these action sequences in this movie really have a lot more adrenaline, but instead they flatline because of the PG-13 rating. You got moments where RoboCop is just shooting a gun out of a guy's hand for fuck's sake. Because it's PG-13, can't have him shoot him in the dick. Had a budget of $22 million, which I guess in some way some of it shows up on screen, but not a whole lot of it. And it only made $10.6 million in the box office. It was a bomb. And rightfully so. This deserved a bomb because it was a stink bomb of a movie. It was a stink bomb of a sequel. And it's just one of those films that there is a myriad of things that do not work about it and fail miserably. From the pacing, from the overall effectiveness of the script or the story, from the questionable decisions that were made, like Lewis's death, which really had no impact at all, the villain who is not intimidating in the slightest, the climax, which is weak and rushed. It's just RoboCop breaks through the window, dead or alive, you're coming with me. And then shenanigans happen. The two robot ninjas show up. They kill each other. RoboCop uses his jetpack, lights Mcdaggett's feet on fire. And then you have Mcdaggett saying things like, you're going to kill us all, you stupid slag. And then RoboCop doing his best Adam West impression. Don't count on it, chum. And then he flies away with Lazarus and Nico, and then the building explodes. And then the last few scenes, Mako bows to RoboCop. Why? I have no idea, because he's been trying to kill him the entire fucking movie. But now, I guess because RoboCop thwarted Mcdaggett and ripped ass, he finds a way to, I guess, to just, I must pay my respects to you. It's like, nice job, Murphy. It's like, what do they call you, Murphy? My friends call me Murphy. You call me RoboCop. Or like RoboCrap. Or like I've been saying, RoboFlop. Oh man, this movie is so bad. But yeah. I don't really know what else to say about RoboCop 3, except, like I said earlier, it was a mistake. And instead of keeping this character and this franchise on life support, Orion should have pulled the plug, done the humane thing, or just put the TV series on the fast track. Because this is completely pathetic and, for the most part, utterly useless. It doesn't really add much of anything to the overall franchise, except piles a whole ton of shit on top of it, and it's all completely unnecessary. I know it has its fans, to each their own. I don't get it. I especially don't get the people like Candy Taylor who says it's the best RoboCop yet. I don't get fans or critics who say that this is better than RoboCop 2. In what way is this better than RoboCop 2? Even the story, despite some interesting concepts, isn't as intriguing as the script for RoboCop 2, despite all of its issues. The action sure as hell isn't better. The performances aren't better. The villain isn't better. What is better with this movie than what is in RoboCop 2? Even if you don't like the film, what makes this better than RoboCop 2? Because I don't see anything. Maybe the score? Other than that, got nothing. Got fucking nothing. Which is pretty much what this film gives me. Fucking nothing. Except for a giant throbbing headache. Or a giant throbbing dick up my ass. How about both? But anyway, God damn it. I don't know what else to say about RoboCop 3. I've ranted on it more than enough. Uh, I think I ranted on. This is a longer rant than the. No, it's almost as long as the other one. But I think. But hey, you know, I still try to trim things down a little bit. But anyway, I guess if I were to rate it at 5 stars, I would give it 1.5. That's probably being generous, but I'm giving it 1.5 because I do like the score by Basil. I think some of the performances are quite solid. I like the jetpack and the gun arm attachment. Although they didn't do the gun arm attachment and the flamethrower are misused because of the PG-13 rating. I mean, you know how much more badass that would be? Like, if it was rated R and he's, like, just chewing up criminals like the Ed 209 did in the first film when he shot up Kinney in the boardroom? That would be awesome. No, but instead, they decided to take Rambo 4 and the minigun scene and take away all the blood and just therefore make it a complete weak sequence and take away all of the balls. But I still like the design, and I think it's well done by Robotine and company. Uh, and some of the aspects of the film in terms of its humor are clever and do get a chuckle out of me. But that's it. Everything else is a mistake. Anyway, thank you for watching my rant on RoboCop 3, and as always, I will see you later. See ya.